Get your high and mighty spoiled little ass out of my goddamn line. You think that name means something here? I don't give a rat's ass if you're the Queen of Sheba." The words, dripping with venom, cut through the humid, chaotic air of the LaGuardia terminal. A brutal silence dropped over the immediate area, a vortex of shock pulling every eye toward the premium check-in counter. There stood a man whose security badge read Everett Sloan, Supervisor. His face was flushed and trembling with rage, a mask of crimson fury. Spittle flew from his lips as he jabbed a shaking finger not toward the exit, but straight at the composed young woman in front of him. "Security, get this scam artist out of here. She's trying to grift her way into first class with a fake ID. These people think the rules don't apply to them, that they can just waltz in here and get whatever they want." Amara Quinn stood perfectly still, a single pillar of calm in a swirling storm of hostility. Her custom luggage sat elegantly beside her. Her passport and first-class boarding pass were clutched in fingers that, to any outside observer, looked steady. But inside, a tremor had begun, a vibration of pure, unadulterated humiliation. 21 years of practice, of lessons in dignity drilled into her by a mother who knew the world would always be watching, kept her spine ramrod straight, even as a fiery blush burned across her cheeks. The surrounding crowd, a mix of business travelers and vacationing families, parted like the Red Sea as two Port Authority officers, their expressions grim, began moving toward her. Whispers erupted and spread through the terminal like a virus. Some voices carried notes of sympathy. Others held the sour tang of suspicion. Most people simply looked away, profoundly uncomfortable with the raw, ugly spectacle unfolding before their morning coffee had even taken hold. "My name is Amara Quinn," she said, her voice a deliberate, measured calm that belied the frantic pounding of her heart. "There's been a clerical error with my reservation that I have been patiently trying to resolve. I'm asking you to please just check the system one more time." The statement was neither a plea nor a demand. It was a simple statement of fact. But Everett Sloane's eyes narrowed into slits of pure disdain. "Yeah, right. And I'm the King of England," he sneered, waving the officers forward with an impatient flick of his wrist. "Get her out of this terminal before I have her arrested for attempted fraud." Just as the officers' hands were about to close around her elbows, Amara's phone vibrated with a soft buzz. She glanced down at the screen. A flicker of something, relief, validation, perhaps even a hint of triumph, crossed her face. The fleeting expression was there and gone, replaced by the same unnerving calm she had maintained throughout the ordeal. She looked past the officers, past the enraged supervisor, and into the middle distance. "You might want to hold off on doing something that will permanently end your career," she said, her voice now barely a whisper, yet carrying absolute authority. "You have about 90 seconds. My father's car just pulled up." But how did we reach this breaking point? How did the daughter of one of the nation's most revered political figures find herself on the verge of being dragged from LaGuardia Airport on a sweltering morning? To understand the cataclysm, we have to go back to when this day began like any other. A collision course set between two lives moving in universes that were worlds apart. If you're watching this right now, I need you to do one thing. Hit that subscribe button and comment where you're joining us from. Because this is not just a story you hear. It's one you experienced, and you won't want to miss a single shocking second of what is about to unfold. For Everett Sloan, the morning had begun as all mornings did, in a shroud of gray disappointment. His alarm clock, a relic from a pre-smart everything era, screeched into life early in the morning. It was the same sound that had torn him from sleep every workday for the last 3 decades. The 58-year-old supervisor rolled out of his creaking bed frame with a groan that seemed to emanate from his very soul, silencing the racket with a practiced, weary slap. Outside his window in Queens, the sky was a blanket of inky blackness. Dawn was still a distant, hollow promise. Another day in paradise, he grumbled to the silent Ademptorum. It was a ritual, a piece of gallows humor that had long ago lost its irony. Ever since Lorraine had left years earlier, taking their beagle and the good living room furniture, Everett's life had contracted into a tight, lonely rhythm of mechanical efficiency. The coffee maker sputtered to life while he stood under a lukewarm shower. The toast burned while he wrestled his tie into a regulation knot. The cable news talking heads chattered in the background, a Greek chorus of outrage and anxiety that perfectly matched the buzzing in his own head as he grabbed his keys, his wallet, and the sad-looking turkey sandwich he had packed the night before. He eased his decade-old Nissan out of the driveway of his small brick townhouse, mentally bracing for the fresh hell a long shift at LaGuardia would surely bring. He was a man drowning in slow motion, and the airport was the sea. What none of his colleagues knew, what Everett concealed beneath his neatly pressed uniform shirt and a carefully constructed veneer of gruff competence, was the reason for the dark circles under his eyes and the permanent clenching in his gut. The day before, he had endured his final performance review before becoming eligible for early retirement. It had been a bloodbath. Customer satisfaction scores have fallen below acceptable thresholds for the third consecutive quarter. The young HR representative, a woman young enough to be his daughter, had recited from a spreadsheet. She had slid a chart across the table, Everett's performance metrics highlighted in damning aggressive red. Formal passenger complaints are up 22%. The words had echoed in his ears all night, a soundtrack to his restless tossing and turning. But it was the final sentence that had truly kept him awake, a guillotine blade hanging over his future. Significant and immediate improvement is required for full pension consideration. 35 years. He had given this goddamn airport 35 years of his life, starting as a baggage handler and clawing his way up to supervisor. Now, some kid with an online MBA was telling him his retirement, his entire future, was on the line because of customer satisfaction, as if anyone had been satisfied at an airport since the late 90s. As if the job weren't a pressure cooker of delays, cancellations, and increasingly hostile passengers who treated airport staff their personal servants. His hands, gnarled from years of physical labor, tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He had 6 months. 6 months to reverse the numbers. 6 months to plaster a fake smile on his face, while entitled passengers yelled at him about baggage fees, tried to sneak oversized luggage on board, and attempted every con in the book to score a free upgrade. 6 months of biting his tongue until it bled, while the acid in his stomach, a low-grade ulcer that had been brewing since the pandemic, chewed another hole in his insides. Miles away, in a sun-drenched brownstone on the Upper West Side, Amara Quinn's day was dawning with an entirely different kind of energy. At 21, she was just coming into her own after a lifetime spent under the microscope of public life. The awkward teenage years as a senator's daughter had given way to a sharp, articulate young woman finishing her degree in social justice at Columbia, fiercely determined to build a life of purpose that was hers and hers alone. Her alarm was a gentle chime that eased her into the day. She stretched, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and reached for her phone. A text from her father, Senator Elias Quinn, was waiting for her. "The world is waiting to hear what you have to say today, Amara. Your mother and I are prouder than words can express. Call me the minute you land. I love you." The message was a balm against the anxiety that had been coiling in her stomach for a week. Today was a landmark. Her first keynote address delivered solo at a major tech conference in Los Angeles. She was speaking on the ethical implications of AI and social equity, a topic she was passionate about. The invitation itself was a victory. For the first time, she wouldn't be introduced to Senator Quinn's daughter. She would be Amara Quinn, a voice in her own right. Her apartment, a tasteful space filled with books and art, reflected her unique position. Privileged, yes, but also independent. A single agent from her security detail, a fact of life she had accepted with resigned grace, maintained a discreet presence. Agent Elena Harper, her primary agent for the last year, had become a trusted, almost sisterly figure. At 32, Elena understood Amara's desire for a life that felt as normal as possible. "Morning, Ms. Quinn," Elena said, her voice warm but professional, appearing in the kitchen doorway as Amara put on a kettle for tea. "Car's on standby. Weather in LA is sunny and 80. "Thanks, Elena," Amara replied. "No last-minute changes." Elena consulted her secure tablet. "Actually, there is one. We just got an alert from the airline. Your original flight has a mechanical issue. They've proactively rebooked you on a direct flight leaving earlier. We'll need to leave soon to be safe." Amara blinked, mentally reshuffling her morning. "Okay, I guess that means I skip the long layover in Dallas, which is a win. Has my father's office been updated? He's flying out for the awards dinner tonight. All handled. He's on a different carrier, arriving a few hours after you." As Amara rushed through her abbreviated morning routine, a familiar buzz of adrenaline and nerves surged through her. This was it, her first major solo outing. A chance to prove she was more than just a name. What she could not possibly have known as she selected her outfit and packed her notes was that the simple routine change of a flight number was about to trigger a catastrophic chain of events that would test not just her legendary composure, but the very identity she was so carefully working to define. Everett Sloan punched in at the employee entrance. The morning briefing was a dull drone of familiar announcements. Possible thunderstorms delaying arrivals from the Midwest. A VIP from a foreign consulate requiring special handling. Understaffing at the baggage claim. "Sloan," his manager said as the meeting broke up. "I need you covering the premium check-in desk." Johnson called out again. Everett's face soured. Premium check-in. The epicenter of entitlement. The playground of the platinum card-carrying divas who believed the rules of physics, time, and common decency did not apply to them. Normally, he would have argued, asked for a different assignment. But with the shadow of his performance review looming, he just gave a curt nod and headed for the counter. Oh, and Everett," the manager added, his voice lowering slightly. "Heads up, we have some high-profile travelers coming through. State Department people, some tech CEO, and supposedly Senator Quinn's daughter is on her way to LA. Make sure everything goes off without a hitch. We don't need any incidents." "No incidents," Everett repeated under his breath as he walked away, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. As if he didn't know how to handle VIPs after 3.5 decades. As if his pension weren't already dangling by a thread. By the time the morning rush hit, Everett was on autopilot. A check-in machine, processing first-class passengers. Scan passport, check ID, print boarding pass. Force a tight-lipped smile. Next. The sheer monotony of it allowed his mind to drift to the raw deal he'd been handed. 35 years of his life, and he was one bad quarter away from a financially ruined retirement. His fate resting in the hands of passengers who wouldn't spit on him if he were on fire. It was in this roiling sea of resentment that Amara Quinn appeared before him. Everett was busy staring at a flashing alert on his screen. The LA flight was overbooked in first class. Fantastic. Another confrontation waiting to happen. He didn't even look up as she placed her expensive leather passport holder on the counter. "Good morning," Amara said, Her voice was clear and polite, a product of years of elocution lessons. "I have a reservation for the flight to Los Angeles." Everett grabbed the passport without making eye contact, his attention still glued to the blinking red light of the overbooking alert. "Name," he grunted, fingers poised over the keyboard. "Quinn, Amara Quinn." At that exact moment, a wire tripped in his brain. It was a perfect storm of exhaustion, the festering ulcer in his gut, the raw wound of his performance review, and a lifetime of resentments he would never admit to anyone, least of all himself. Everett Sloane finally looked up, his eyes narrowing as they took in the young black woman standing before him. Designer luggage, an impeccably tailored dress, an aura of quiet confidence that screamed old money and privilege. He made a judgment in the space of a heartbeat. "Right," he said, the single word saturated with sarcasm. "And I'm Santa Claus." He glanced at the passport, saw the name, but his mind had already dismissed it as a forgery. "I'm going to need to see some more identification, miss." Beside Amara, Agent Elena Harper's body tensed, her hand instinctively moving toward the credentials inside her blazer. But Amara gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of her head. This wasn't her first rodeo. People were often surprised to see her, expecting a motorcade, a flock of assistants. She had grown up from the skinny, brace-faced girl the public remembered into a sophisticated young woman. "Of course," Amara replied, her voice remaining impossibly steady as she produced her New York driver's license and her Columbia University ID. "Here you are." Everett inspected the IDs with theatrical scrutiny, momentarily forgetting about the overbooking. They looked real. Too real. "High-end fakes," he concluded. The photo matched perfectly. The name was consistent. But a knot of ugly suspicion inside him, a poison he didn't know he'd been nursing for years, refused to let it go. "They appear to be in order," he said, his voice slow and deliberate. "But given the extraordinary nature of your claim, I'm going to need to get these verified by my supervisor." "Is there an issue, sir?" Agent Harper asked, stepping half a pace forward, her presence suddenly much more palpable. Everett's gaze flickered to Elena, taking in her professional demeanor, the earpiece, the alert way she held herself. "And who might you be?" "Ms. Quinn's security," Elena replied, her tone level as she flashed her federal agent credentials. For a split second, a crack appeared in Everett's certainty. But then a businessman nearby dropped his briefcase with a loud clatter, and in that momentary distraction, Everett's doubt hardened back into concrete conviction. These had to be fakes, elaborate ones. The Secret Service, or whichever agency this was, wouldn't let a major senator's daughter just stand in a regular line, even the premium one. She'd be escorted through a private entrance. This was a grift, someone using a famous name to angle for special treatment, to bypass the overbooking he was just about to deal with. "I'm going to need both of you to step aside while I have these authenticated," Everett said, his voice taking on the official, commanding tone he reserved for rule breakers and liars. "It shouldn't be long if everything checks out." Amara felt that old familiar weight drop into the pit of her stomach, the leaden feeling that accompanied every side-eye glance, every double take, every moment of doubt she had faced in her life. The unspoken question, "Who are you to be in this space?" "Mr. Sloane," she said, her eyes fixed on his name tag. "I understand completely that you have protocols to follow, and that's fine. But I would appreciate it if we could handle this with a bit more discretion. There's no need to cause a scene." Her calm, reasonable tone was like gasoline on the fire of his resentment. Entitled. The word screamed in his head, telling me how to do my job. "Ma'am, please step to the side. Next!" he barked. As another passenger edged forward, Amara and Agent Harper moved to the side of the counter. Elena was already speaking quietly into her wrist microphone, alerting her team, requesting verification be sent to the airport supervisor's office. Amara took a slow, deep breath, centering herself, hearing her mother's voice in her head. Never let them see you sweat. Your dignity is your shield. The situation deteriorated with shocking speed. Everett didn't call his immediate manager. He called Port Authority police, reporting suspicious individuals using potentially fraudulent IDs to breach security protocols. When the two officers arrived, Everett framed it as a slam-dunk case of fraud. His earlier flicker of doubt was now buried under a mountain of self-righteous indignation. "These individuals are claiming this woman is Amara Quinn," he explained, his voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "They've even got some kind of fake federal ID. With a high-profile name like that, I figured it was best to get you involved." The two officers, world-weary men who looked like they'd seen it all, took the IDs from Everett. The older one. Officer Duggadwa examined them closely. "Ma'am," he addressed Amara, his tone professional. "What is your destination today?" "Los Angeles," she replied. "I'm the keynote speaker at the Future Forward Tech Conference this afternoon." Officer Delgado nodded, then turned to Agent Harper. "Your credentials, please." Elena produced her federal ID again, along with a secondary document confirming her protective assignment to Amara Quinn. The officer's scrutiny was more thorough than Everett's had been. His face remained an unreadable mask. "If you'll just wait here for one moment," Officer Delgado said, stepping away with his partner to confer in low tones. The seconds stretched into agonizing minutes. Amara could feel the stares of the other passengers, a mixture of curiosity and judgment. She kept her posture perfect, her gaze straight ahead. But the tremor in her hands had returned. This level of scrutiny was new. Usually the official credentials were the end of it. When the officers came back, there was a visible shift in their demeanor. Officer Delgado addressed Everett. "Sir, these credentials appear authentic. Federal Protective Services have confirmed Agent Harper's assignment to Ms. Quinn's detail." Everett's face went beet red, a tide of humiliation washing over him. But instead of conceding his mistake, he doubled down. Trapped by his own escalating rhetoric. "That doesn't mean she's who she says she is. Anyone can hire a security guard." "Mr. Sloan," Officer Delgado began, his voice edged with caution. But Everett was on a roll now, his voice rising in volume and pitch. "Look at her! Does she have an entourage? Was there a call ahead? We always get a heads up for VIPs like that. This is a scam to get priority treatment and avoid being bumped from an overbooked flight, and I won't stand for it." The implication, foul and undeniable, hung in the sweltering terminal air. "What exactly does a senator's daughter look like, Mr. Sloan?" "Sir," Officer Delgado said, his voice firming up, "I think it's best if we get your manager down here to sort this out." "I am the goddamn supervisor on duty," Everett roared, "and I am telling you these people are frauds. It happens all the time." A crowd was now actively gathering. Smartphones had materialized. Dozens of tiny black lenses pointed in their direction, recording. Amara's heart was hammering against her ribs. She was now a viral incident waiting to happen. Decades of media training took over. Neutral face. No sudden movements. Everything you do can and will be twisted against you. "Mr. Sloan," she tried one last time, her voice quiet. "I understand you feel you're doing your job, but if you would just call the airline's own VIP liaison, they can verify everything in 60 seconds. "I don't need to call a damn soul," Everett snapped, his composure shattering completely. "I've been doing this job since before you were a goddamn twinkle in your daddy's eye, and I know a fake when I see one." And that's when he did it. The act that would incinerate his career and make his name infamous from coast to coast. He turned to the officers, but his voice was projected for the entire terminal. For the phones. For posterity. "Get your high and mighty spoiled little ass out of my goddamn line. You think that name means something here? I don't give a rat's ass who you are." He took a step toward Amara, his face contorted in a mask of fury. Security, remove this scam artist trying to grift her way into first class. These people always think the rules don't apply to them. The slur, the insinuation, the sheer ugliness of it sucked the air out of the room. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Officer Delgado's face hardened into a slab of granite, and his partner instinctively took a step away from Everett, physically disassociating from the supervisor's meltdown. Amara Quinn stood perfectly still, her designer luggage a stark contrast to the ugliness of the moment. 21 years of practice in the art of public dignity held her spine erect, a final shield against the tidal wave of humiliation threatening to drown her. "My name is Amara Quinn," she said again, her voice wavering for the first time. "There has been a mistake." "Yeah, right, and I'm the King of England," Everett sneered, his confidence now buoyed by the attention. "Get her out of here." As the officers moved hesitantly toward her, bound by protocol, but clearly disgusted, Amara's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down. A message. A fleeting, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "You might want to hold off on doing something that will permanently end your career," she said quietly, her voice imbued with a newfound authority. "You have about 90 seconds. My father's car just pulled up." The private aviation wing of LaGuardia, tucked away from the main terminal's sprawling chaos, was an oasis of quiet efficiency. Its staff were masters of discretion, accustomed to handling titans of industry, international diplomats, and A-list celebrities with unflappable calm. The tinted glass doors slid open to admit an entourage that caused even these seasoned professionals to straighten their spines. Senator Elias Quinn, accompanied by a small team of federal agents, strode in with the easy athletic grace that had defined his public life. Unlike his daughter, who could still occasionally navigate the world with a degree of anonymity, the former presidential candidate and sitting senator was one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. Recognition rippled through the private lounge. "Good morning," he said, his famous baritone voice radiating warmth. "Lovely day to fly." The lead security liaison, momentarily starstruck, nodded vigorously. "Welcome, Senator. It's an honor to have you with us." Senator Quinn smiled, the crinkles around his eyes deepening. At 61, his hair was more salt than pepper, giving him a distinguished, almost regal air. "Just catching a flight to the West Coast for a dinner. My daughter, Amara, should have already checked in through the main terminal. She was on an earlier flight." Before the liaison could reply, one of the senator's agents touched his earpiece, his professional calm evaporating in an instant. He leaned in close to his principal. "Sir, there's a situation. Agent Harper is reporting that Ms. Quinn is being detained at the premium check-in counter in Terminal B. An issue with her identification." The senator's smile vanished, replaced by an expression of intense focus that his staff called the committee chairman face. He turned back to the airport liaison, the easygoing charm gone. "It seems my daughter is having some trouble at your main check-in desk. I'd appreciate it if this could be resolved immediately." The liaison, suddenly looking pale, fumbled for his radio. "Absolutely, Senator. Right away. I'll get a manager over there instantly." "Don't bother," the senator replied, already moving toward the doors that connected to the main terminal. "I'll handle it myself." His tone was quiet, but it carried an authority that brooked no argument. His security detail fell into formation around him, a silent, disciplined wedge parting the way as they moved with purpose. As they strode through the airport, Senator Quinn's mind was a whirlwind of controlled fury. He and his wife had spent years preparing Amara for moments like this. They'd had the talk countless times: how to de-escalate, how to stay calm, how to assert her rights without endangering herself. Knowing these moments would come didn't make the reality of them any less painful. It was a fresh wound every single time. Back at the premium check-in counter, the situation had frozen into a tense tableau. Everett Sloan, having staked his career on this confrontation, refused to back down even as the officer's reluctance became more obvious. The crowd of onlookers had swelled, a sea of smartphones capturing the meltdown. Officer Delgado and his partner stood between Everett and Amara, trying to keep the peace while they waited for a higher authority to intervene. Agent Harper stood like a statue beside her charge, her voice a low, steady stream of information into her microphone. Amara herself had retreated into a state of dignified silence, a defense mechanism honed over a lifetime. The initial sting of Everett's words had subsided, replaced by a profound and weary sadness. This was the tax she paid for her skin color, her name, her very existence in certain spaces. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the murmuring of the crowd, a wave of gasps and shocked whispers that started at the far end of the terminal and rolled toward them. Heads swiveled. The sea of travelers parted. Through the gap, a familiar figure approached, flanked by dark-suited agents, moving with an unmistakable combination of power and grace. Everett Sloan, still spewing invective about scammers and fake IDs, was the last to notice. "I want her removed from this airport now." "Excuse me?" A deep, calm voice said from directly behind him, a voice known to billions around the world. "I think you've made a terrible mistake concerning my daughter." Everett froze mid-rant. The blood drained from his face. He turned slowly, as if moving through deep water, and found himself looking directly into the cool, steady eyes of Senator Elias Quinn. The senator stood there, not with anger, but with a palpable aura of disappointment and authority that was far more intimidating. "Senator," Everett stammered, his bravado instantly deflating like a popped balloon. There's been a misunderstanding." "Yes," Senator Quinn agreed, his voice dangerously soft. "There certainly has." He glided past the dumbstruck supervisor to stand beside his daughter, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "You all right, sweetheart?" She managed a small nod, relief warred with the residual sting of humiliation in her eyes. "I'm fine, Dad. Just a little booking issue." The senator turned back to Everett, who now looked physically smaller, as if the air had been let out of him. The surrounding crowd was utterly, deathly silent. Hundreds of phones were held aloft, documenting the incredible scene. "It would seem," the senator said, his voice effortlessly commanding the space, "that my daughter is having some trouble catching her flight. I'm sure we can clear this up quickly so she can be on her way." He offered a thin, mirthless smile. "I imagine everyone involved would prefer a solution that avoids any further embarrassment." It was a life raft, a chance for a dignified exit, and Officer Delgado grabbed it instantly. "Senator Quinn, our deepest apologies for this. We will get Ms. Quinn checked in immediately." He turned to his partner. "Call for a senior airline representative, now." Everett Sloan stood paralyzed, the full catastrophic weight of his actions crashing down on him. He hadn't just humiliated a young woman. He had publicly attacked the daughter of one of the country's most powerful men with a racial slur, all while being recorded by an army of citizen journalists. His pension, his career, his reputation. They had all been incinerated in less than 15 minutes. I didn't... He couldn't form a coherent thought. Senator Quinn regarded him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Anyone who had watched him navigate a contentious Senate hearing would have recognized the look. A calm, calculated assessment of the situation. A weighing of the most strategic path forward. "Mr. Sloan, is it?" the senator said finally, his gaze dropping to the man's name tag. "I appreciate that you have a job to do. Security protocols are important." He paused, letting the diplomatic words hang in the air before delivering the subtle but devastating blow. "But I can't help but wonder why my daughter's verified identification was met with such extreme prejudice. That might be a conversation worth having." The subtext was as clear as glass. This wasn't about a mistaken ID. It was about the bias that had fueled the mistake. An airline manager arrived, sprinting across the concourse, her face pale with panic. "Senator Quinn, Ms. Quinn, I am so sorry. Please, let's get you to our executive lounge. We will handle everything from there." "Thank you." The senator nodded graciously. As the manager began to lead them away, he paused beside Everett, who was still rooted to the spot, a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. The senator leaned in, speaking in a low voice meant only for Everett's ears. "My wife and I taught our children how to conduct themselves in moments just like this. We taught them because we always knew, that these moments would find them, no matter who their father was." He straightened his jacket. "I sincerely hope you spend some time today thinking about why you were so certain my daughter was a liar. Some self-reflection could be very illuminating for you." With that final, quiet pronouncement, he turned and followed his daughter, leaving Everett Sloane utterly alone in the wreckage of his own making, surrounded by the condemning stares of strangers and the quiet, damning clicks of social media posts being uploaded into the digital ether. By the time Amara's flight was taxiing for takeoff, the incident was already the #1 trending topic in the country. News alerts blared from phones across the terminal. Senator's daughter subjected to vicious racist attack at LaGuardia. But for everyone involved, for Amara Quinn, for Everett Sloane, and for a nation about to be embroiled in a fierce debate, the story was only just beginning. If the story has you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed. The fallout from this public explosion is even more shocking than the confrontation itself. The airline's executive lounge was a haven of hushed tones and complimentary champagne, a world away from the bedlam of the main terminal. The moment the heavy oak door closed behind them, sealing out the gawking stares and frenetic energy, Amara felt the armor she'd worn for the past hour begin to fracture. She sucked in a shaky breath, fighting back the hot tears that threatened to fall. Her father, attuned to her every mood since the day she was born, saw it immediately. "Hey," he said softly, steering her to a secluded corner. "Talk to me. Are you really okay?" Amara nodded, unable to trust her voice. She sank into a plush leather armchair as the panicked airline manager discreetly vanished, leaving them alone. "I am so sorry you went through that," the senator said, his voice laced with a fury he rarely showed the world. He was a father whose power and influence had proven useless in shielding his child from a primal, ugly hurt. "You handled yourself with more grace than he deserved." "I'm fine," Amara finally whispered, her voice husky. "It wasn't the first time." The 6 words landed between them with the weight of a shared history. Not the first time her presence in an exclusive space had been questioned. Not the first time she'd been forced to swallow her pride and remain poised in the face of bigotry. Not the first time Hia had been forced to witness the world judging his daughter by a standard that had nothing to do with her character. "No," he agreed, his voice somber. "Not the first time." He leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "When you and your sister were little, your mom and I had so many sleepless nights wondering how we could possibly prepare you for this, how we could arm you with the confidence to know your own worth when the world would constantly try to tear it down." His voice grew softer. "I remember your mother saying, 'We can't build a bubble around them. We have to build a fortress inside them.'" A watery smile touched Amara's lips. That sounds like Mom. The adrenaline from the confrontation was beginning to recede, leaving a hollow exhaustion in its wake. "You didn't have to come, you know. Elena had it under control." "Under control isn't the same as making it right," he countered. "I wasn't going to let that man humiliate you for 1 second longer than necessary." He shook his head, a muscle jumping in his jaw. Some things are a father's job, no matter how old his daughter gets. She looked at him then, truly looked at the man, the world saw as a political titan. She saw the new lines of worry etched around his eyes, the weariness that clung to him even on his best days. He wasn't a senator in that moment. He was just her dad, hurting because she was hurting. "It's going to be all over the news, isn't it?" she asked, already knowing the answer. An incident like this involving race and one of the country's most prominent political families was a media firestorm guaranteed. Her father's expression turned grim. "That fire is already raging. My press secretary is getting calls from every network. The question isn't if it gets out, it's how we respond." He held her gaze. "It's your call, Amara. We can release a simple statement demanding privacy and let the storm pass, or we can use it. Turn it into a teachable moment," Amara finished. The words tasted like metal in her mouth. "Use my humiliation as a national talking point on unconscious bias. It would be your story to tell," he said, his tone careful, respectful. "You're an adult now. You get to decide when to be private and when to be public." Amara thought of the speech waiting for her in Los Angeles, a carefully crafted argument about ethics and technology. Now it felt strangely sterile, disconnected from the raw, real-world injustice she had just experienced. Perhaps there was a way to connect the two, to show how systemic biases become encoded not just in people, but in the very systems we build. "I need to think about it," she said. "But I think I want to say something. Not to crucify that one man, but to talk about the mindset that allows men like him to exist." She paused. "If I'm going to be in the spotlight anyway, I should at least be the one aiming it." A look of immense pride softened her father's features. "Spoken like a true Quinn." His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. "Your mother. She's seen the news. She says to tell you she's furious. She loves you, and she's incredibly proud of how you carried yourself." He looked up, a hint of the family's familiar teasing glinting in his eyes. "She also said to remind me that this wouldn't have happened if I had just listened to her and booked us on the same flight." The normalcy of the banter was a lifeline. Amara felt a genuine laugh escape her, easing the tightness in her chest. "You'd think after 30 years of marriage, you would have learned that Mom is always right. It's a lesson I am destined to learn daily for the rest of my life." He chuckled. His expression turned serious again. "Your flight is boarding soon. Are you sure you're okay? I can get my staff to get me on this flight." "Dad, I'm fine," she insisted gently. "I'm a 21-year-old woman. I can manage a flight by myself. Besides, I need the time in the air to figure out what I'm going to say this afternoon." He nodded, respecting her autonomy. "All right. I'll see you in LA. My dinner is at the same hotel as your conference." He stood, but then paused, a thought crossing his mind. "You know, that supervisor, Sloan, he just detonated his own life. Everything he's worked for is probably gone in this single moment." "He earned it," Amara said, a flicker of her own anger surfacing. "He did," her father conceded. "But I've learned something in my years in Washington. Public condemnation hardens hearts more often than it changes them. Real change comes from somewhere else." "You're not about to tell me I should forgive him, are you?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. "Because that's a pretty big ask right now." "Never," he said firmly. "Forgiveness is your own business, on your own time. I'm just saying the loudest response isn't always the most powerful one." Before she could process his words, a senior airline executive appeared at the lounge door, her face a mask of practiced concern and deep-seated panic. She introduced herself as the Director of Customer Experience and offered a string of effusive apologies, assuring them that Mr. Sloan had been immediately placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. As the executive was leaving, a thought, spurred by her father's last comment, came to Amara. "Excuse me," she said. "What will happen to him?" "To Mr. Sloan?" The executive paused. "Well, given the severity of the incident and the public nature of it all," she left the outcome hanging in the air. Termination was a certainty. Amara looked at her father. A silent conversation passed between them. "I would like to be kept informed of the outcome of your investigation," she said carefully. "If that's possible." "Of course, Miss Quinn," the woman promised, before retreating. "What's on your mind?" her father asked, seeing the contemplative look on her face. "I'm thinking about what you said, about what really changes things." She met his gaze, a new resolve hardening in her own. "I'm not sure what it is yet, but I don't think just having him fired is the answer." Her father's smile was one of pure, unadulterated pride. "Whatever you decide to do, I know it will be the right thing." He hugged her tightly. "Now go get on your plane and prepare to change the world." As she walked down the jet bridge, Amara Quinn felt a shift inside her. The speech she had planned was no longer enough. The universe had just handed her a different, more challenging, and far more personal topic. A new plan was beginning to form, one that was not just about delivering a speech, but about starting a conversation that might begin with one disgraced airport supervisor, but could, if she handled it right, ripple much further. In a sterile, windowless office in the airport's administrative wing, Everett Sloan was living the worst day of his life. His phone had been confiscated. He could see his managers huddled outside the glass door, speaking in hushed, serious tones, and pointedly not looking at him. His suspension had already begun. The chief of operations, a man he'd considered a friend for 20 years, had come in and laid it out in brutal, simple terms. The videos were everywhere. The airport was issuing a public apology. His career, for all intents and purposes, was over. Early retirement with a severely reduced pension was the best-case scenario. He sat there, a hollowed-out man, replaying the morning in a torturous loop. He had been so sure, so righteous. The words had poured out of him, a torrent of poison he hadn't even known was inside him. And then the senator had appeared. A ghost from the TV screen made real, and the floor had fallen out from under his entire life. The escort off airport property was the walk of shame to end all walks of shame. Former colleagues turned their heads. Strangers pointed and whispered. In the car, he turned on the radio only to hear his own name being discussed by a panel of commentators, dissecting his racist meltdown as a symptom of a diseased nation. He punched the radio off. The silence of the car was now a roaring accusation. When he got home to his empty townhouse, the silence was even worse. He walked to the liquor cabinet and poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon. His hand shaking so badly, he splashed it on the counter. He drank it in one go. The burn in his throat was a welcome distraction from the shame burning in his soul. He poured another, and then he sat in his worn-out armchair, the glass in his hand, and for the first time in his life, Everett Sloan forced himself to ask the question he had spent a lifetime avoiding. Why? Why had he looked at that polite, well-dressed young woman and seen a liar, a grifter, a threat? Why had his certainty been so absolute, his rage so explosive? In the crushing, bourbon-scented quiet of his living room, Everett Sloan began the terrifying, necessary work of looking in the mirror and not liking the man who looked back. The keynote hall at the Palmer House Hotel in Los Angeles was buzzing. Hundreds of the brightest young minds in tech were gathered, and the topic on everyone's lips wasn't the future of coding. It was the viral video from LaGuardia. When Amara Quinn was introduced, the applause was thunderous. As she stepped up to the podium, she saw her father slip into a seat in the back of the room, a quiet pillar of support. She set her prepared notes aside. "I had a very different speech planned for you today," she began, her voice clear and strong, resonating through the vast hall. "But this morning, I was reminded that sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we're not planning to have." She told them what happened. She didn't sensationalize it or ask for pity. She recounted the events with a calm, factual precision that made the injustice of it all the more glaring. A hush fell over the room. The easy and frankly satisfying response would be to demand that this man be fired, she said, her eyes scanning the faces in the crowd. To make him a public example of what happens when you let bigotry cloud your judgment. And accountability is essential. Actions must have consequences. She paused, letting the weight of her next words settle. But my father, who has faced more than his share of this kind of hatred, has always taught me that you don't defeat darkness by creating more of it. You defeat it by shining a light. Cancellation creates scapegoats. Conversation creates change. From the back of the room, Senator Quinn watched his daughter, his heart swelling with a pride so fierce it almost hurt. I don't know this man's story, Amara continued. I don't know what pressures or pains in his own life caused him to look at me and see a threat instead of a customer. Understanding is not an excuse for his behavior, but it may be the first step toward preventing it from happening again. She then pivoted, brilliantly weaving the morning's events into her planned topic. She spoke of the biases we hold as individuals and how those same biases become amplified and automated when we build them into the algorithms and systems that govern our modern world. It was a masterclass in turning a personal wound into a universal lesson. And then she delivered her conclusion, a move that stunned everyone in the room, including her father. For that reason, she said, her voice ringing with conviction, I have contacted the airline and formally requested that they do not terminate Mr. Sloane's employment. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the audience. Instead, she went on, I have proposed something else. I have offered to meet with him privately to start a dialogue. And I have challenged the airline to partner with me and other advocacy groups to build a new kind of training program, one that goes beyond sterile HR videos and fosters real, difficult, transformative conversations about bias. A program that perhaps Mr. Sloane himself, once he has gone through his own journey of reflection, might one day help to lead. The room was silent for a beat, and then it erupted. The applause was deafening, a standing ovation that went on and on. As Amara left the stage, her father met her in the wings, his eyes shining. He simply pulled her into a hug. No words needed. We're at the most critical part of this story. If you believe in the power of dialogue over division, subscribe to our channel right now and tell us your thoughts in the comments. The final chapter of this unbelievable true story is coming right up. Sometime later, Amara Quinn sat in a neutral meeting room at a university halfway between her apartment and his house. The door opened and Everett Sloane shuffled in. He looked like a man who had been through a war. He was gaunt, his eyes were bloodshot, and he moved like every bone in his body ached. He had prepared an apology, practiced it in the mirror 100 times, but when he saw her sitting there, poised and calm, the words died in his throat. Mr. Sloane, she said, her voice gentle as she stood. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. He could only nod. Before we say anything else, he finally choked out, his voice raspy. I need to tell you how profoundly sorry I am. There is no excuse, none, for how I treated you. I appreciate that, Mr. Sloane, she replied, motioning for him to sit. But I didn't ask you here for an apology. I asked you here because I wanted to understand why. And so he told her. He told her about the 35 years of service, the bitter divorce, the fears about his pension, the crushing feeling of being made obsolete in a world that was changing too fast. And then he told her the harder truth, the truth he'd finally been forced to confront in the lonely, terrifying silence of the past days. The truth is, he confessed, his voice breaking, I didn't see you. I saw a stereotype I didn't even know I was carrying around in my head. A stereotype that made it impossible for me to believe you were who you said you were. And for that ugliness, I will be ashamed for the rest of my life." Amara listened without judgment, without interruption. When he was done, a long silence filled the room. "Do you know what the worst part was, Mr. Sloan?" she finally asked. "It wasn't just that you doubted me. It was that you were so certain I was a fraud that you were willing to destroy your own career to prove it. And I have to wonder, if I'd been a young white woman, would you have escalated the situation so quickly? Would your doubt have turned into such rage?" Everett met her gaze, and for the first time there was no defensiveness in his eyes, only a profound, bottomless sorrow. "No," he whispered, "it wouldn't have." The honesty of the admission was a painful, necessary surgery on his soul. "Thank you for that," she said. She then slid a folder across the table. It was the proposal for the training program she had outlined in her speech. "The airline has agreed to this in principle, a new form of accountability, one focused on restorative justice, not just punishment. And they've agreed that if you commit to this process, to undergoing intensive counseling and training, your job won't be terminated. Instead, they want you to help build this program from the inside." Everett stared at this folder as if it were a mirage. He had come here expecting condemnation. He was being offered a chance at redemption. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice thick with emotion. "After what I did, why would you do this for me?" "Because my parents raised me to believe that no one is disposable," she said simply. "And because firing you fixes the problem for one day, changing the culture of the entire airport, that fixes the problem for everyone, forever. This isn't for you, Mr. Sloan. It's for the next person who looks like me who walks up to a check-in counter." In the months that followed, an incredible transformation began. Everett Sloan did return to work, not as a supervisor, but as a key member of the team developing the Dignity in Travel initiative. He became the program's most unlikely and powerful advocate, sharing his own story with brutal honesty, forcing colleagues to confront their own uncomfortable biases. 6 months after their first meeting, Amara and Everett stood on a stage together at a national aviation conference. They presented the pilot program, which had already led to a measurable decrease in bias-related complaints at LaGuardia and was now being considered for national implementation. After the presentation, Senator Quinn, who had been watching from the audience, approached them. He shook Everett's hand. "Mr. Sloan," he said, "what you and my daughter have done here is the definition of public service. It takes immense courage to admit when you are wrong, and even more to dedicate yourself to making it right." "Sir," Everett replied, his voice steady, "your daughter didn't just save my career. She saved me from myself." As they walked out of the conference hall together, father and daughter, Amara linked her arm through his. The path she had chosen had been the harder one. It had required her to face her own pain and to see the humanity in the man who had inflicted it. But the results were undeniable. The moral arc of the universe, she had learned, doesn't bend on its own. It is bent by the difficult, courageous, and compassionate choices of individuals. A choice that turned a moment of profound ugliness into a powerful force for lasting change. This has been one of the most powerful stories we've ever had the honor to tell. It's a reminder that even in our most divided moments, there is a path forward if we are brave enough to choose conversation over condemnation. What did you think? Let us know in the comments below. And please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that inspire. Thank you for watching.